Hello, everyone, and welcome to our channel. I'm Abhinav Mujju, Managing Director of AP Education Online, and welcome to our latest online discussion, My Book, My Valentine. Today, along with our panel members, we are going to be discussing books we love and the impact these books have had on our lives in terms of, for example, mental health, sleep, day-to-day life, uh, to name a few. So on our panel today, I'm joined by Dr. Hazel Hind, based in Scotland, who has been involved in teaching and management across both further and higher education sectors. She has experience in academic and vocational learning and in postgraduate education and vocational professional development. She has been involved in leading digital strategies, learning strategies in further education and also in post-graduation education. Joining with me today, Madhu Sharma from India. She's a writer by choice and an educationist by profession. She's an international education consultant who inspects schools mainly in Middle East. She has evaluated schools since 2009 in UAE, Bahrain, Lebanon, and worked as a school improvement advisor in Nepal too. Prior to that, she was a former principal in India and works now as a national assessor and auditor for different curricula. A mother of two, Madhu is settled in Hyderabad with a husband. She has avid interest in reading and contributes regularly in national dailies. Also joining with me today is Shazia Hussain. She's the CEO and founder of Eduvate, which provides innovative solutions in education. Shazia has a wealth of educational experience and has been in education sector for over 20 years with leadership experience in the UK and abroad. As a head teacher, principal, Shazia realized that it was time to claim her power back as a leader and therefore decided to leave her headship and place her entire focus on entrepreneurship. She is currently working on multiple projects such as leadership, coaching, educational consulting, collaboration with international education management and student recruitment, and building a portfolio of digital products. So, welcome to you all, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. For those of you watching this live on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And if we have time at the end of the discussion, we will look to answer any questions you may have brought up in the chat room. So go ahead and type any questions you may have in our chat room. So, with the first part of our program, I would be asking our panel to tell us how the book they have chosen can relate to specific aspects of mental health. So, starting with you, Hazel, if I may come to you first. So, tell us a bit about the book you have chosen.
This is a book, a favourite for a long time. It was actually written in 1948, so it's a bit of a classic by the American writer Dale Carnegie, and it's called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, which is a super title. What I really like about this book is it is so engaging. It is a factual book, but it's written with a narrative style like a novel. He's got various really interesting anecdotes about very sort of famous people. I mean, it opens with how to live and focus your mind rather than a snowball effect of worrying about one thing and then it accumulates and you think, oh, and what if this happens, and your mind races. He tells you stories about famous people. The first one is the founder of Johns Hopkins University and how his training of his focus and his thoughts actually, he attributed his success to that. He didn't attribute it to his studies or intellectual things. He actually attributed it to self-discipline and organizing your thoughts and focus and being positive. So he's got really engaging stories in each chapter. It was written because he said that he felt like he was the most unhappy young man in the world because he could not stop worrying. So it's his kind of personal reflections on what worked for him and other people. And he takes you through various encounters and various stories and anecdotes about how to tackle your circumstances and how even if you can't control events, you are in control of how you react to them. You're in control of yourself. And it has 8 chapters, 8 sections. And it begins with fundamental facts about worrying and the worrying process. And it talks about how to regain your focus and control of your focus, and how to stop the snowball effect of starting to worry about things that actually aren't real yet and may never happen, but it's just the habits of worrying. So he talks about that as well, and how to keep positivity. There's various sections. There's even a section about how to take feedback and criticism, but do it in a very positive way, and how to foster thoughts about peace and courage, and how to be hopeful and actually have a strategy of hopefulness rather than negativity. How to focus and take value out of each day rather than letting your mind race ahead, but actually really gain mastery of every day and your control over of your day, and how to relax even in stressful circumstances, and technique for doing that. And it also talks about how he personally conquered his own habits of worrying and turned his life around. And I thought, in present circumstances, everyone has been thrown into a situation where we don't feel as in control as we were before. We're maybe living and working and studying in a situation that's very different from our normal situation. And it's how we make the best of the control that we have within our circumstances, and how we focus our own mind positively. And my favourite thing about this book is it almost reads like a novel. Although it's factual, it's so engaging, it's very hard to put down. You really relate to him and the characters that he refers to and how they've handled their circumstances. So you can easily identify with it as a reader, and that makes it very engaging and very helpful. And it's a book that you can either read cover to cover, or you can pick it up when you need it. And when you find yourself slipping into those negative habits, you can take it off the bookshelf and dip into it, and he'll have a strategy for how to handle that situation.
Perfect, perfect. Interesting, really interesting. I think we'll definitely like to know more about that. So coming to my next question that I would like to ask based on that. So Hazel, can you think of ways that this book can help with depression and dysthymia?
Yes, it has, as well as being very engaging and reading like a story, it actually gives you very practical tactics for what to do. So, for example, he'll talk about if you're very worried about something, he takes you through a step-by-step formula of how to address that. And the first thing he says is, well, okay, think about what's the worst that could happen. So, say you're working from home and you don't feel you're engaging with it, and you start to worry about, I could lose my job, right? So, really extreme worry. So you say, well, okay, think about that extreme thing. And say, what's the worst thing that could happen? Right, well, accept that and sort of say, okay, prepare for that. Now, what's the best thing that could happen, or what's the intermediate that could happen? Well, I might have some problems adjusting to this, or I might need to reevaluate my working approach, or the amount of hours I have, or when I take breaks in that. And you sort of work back from the worst scenario to the more positive and much more realistic scenarios. So he does it as a sort of mental exercise of how you take that problem from the gigantic problem that your imagination is making it into, and you deconstruct it down to what is much more likely. And when you get to that much more realistic summary of the problem, it becomes much more easy to think about, right, how do I practically deal with this? And he also has strategies for focusing your mind so that you take advantage of all the positives that you have around you, and take your focus off the power of your imagination, which starts to run away with itself in a negative way, and focus in on what you can control and what is much more likely, and develop the mental exercise of zoning your focus in on what you want to concentrate on, and that immediately takes your stress down. So there's really practical exercises in it. It's a lovely book because it's a combination of practical advice, really interesting stories and scenarios, and really engaging personal reflections that people can relate to.
Great.
Almost like talking to a friend, the way he's written this. So that's what makes it such a charming book. It's a really engaging book.
I'm sure I can. Your smile on your face tells all, says everything. I can understand that. So Hazel, as you know, there are some sometimes there are some books or some where people like to read while they like to before they like it for like say for example if they have to they have a lack of sleep or they get that peace by reading this and they feel it. So. So could it help boosting your sleep? Could this book or books in general help boosting
It,
your sleep?
it absolutely would, because if you're not sleeping, it's a very easy book to read. It's very engaging. The writer's almost like a character. You get to know the author as if he was a character, although it's about his real life issues and other very famous people he talks about in it. So it engages you almost like a story. But instead of being a work of fiction and fantasy, it's actually a story. As I say, it's almost like a friend talking to you. Well, this is how I've handled this.
Mhm.
This is a situation I was in, and I was, in such and such a place, and this happened, or this famous person reflected in this experience they had. And that's just like the situation you're in right now. But
Mhm.
you can use this advice and you can use their reflections and adopt that process yourself. So it's like talking to someone who's kind of calming you down by
Okay.
the way they're engaging with you. And at the same time, they're actually giving you practical tactics and real advice about, okay, take that problem now, take ownership of it. You're in control of this.
Mhm.
You're in control of yourself. You're in control of the processes that you deal with this by. So it works in different levels. It's really engaging to read, but you also come away with sets of strategies that you can start to work on. So if you're
Great.
sitting at night and your mind's racing and your imagination's running away with you, and before you know it, you've got all sorts of horrible scenarios that are worrying you, this book will actually calm you down and get you to
Mhm.
refocus and help you to think, okay, let's just stop right there and rethink this. And that itself makes you calmer. You start to feel more in control, much
Yes.
more positive, and as
Great.
well as dealing with present situations, it actually helps to develop a strategy for the rest of your life, whether you're a student, whether
Great.
you're working, so that your job or your relationships or your studies don't start to overwhelm you. And you
True.
can actually start to enjoy them again and re engage on a better level. So, very practical, but just very enjoyable at the same time. As I say, it's a book that if you're not sleeping, you can take it and you'll get practical strategies, but it also just lifts your mind because you've got such an engaging writer. He's such a
Great.
charming character in his own right that you start to feel the book's almost like a friend that's taking you
Great.
through.
Great. 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 Very, very interesting, Hazel. Thanks for sharing those experiences and thoughts with us. So, Madhu, if I come to you next, so tell us
Yeah,
a bit about the book you have chosen today.
yeah. The book I have chosen is The Breath of Gold by Satya Saran, and it's based on the life of Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia. He is a national treasure for us, but I actually knew very little about him. And I didn't know that the flute doesn't have scales, or it doesn't have, I mean, it's just the breath and the holes in the bamboo stick, which leads to such beautiful rendering of melody coming out of it. And then once I got into it, I accidentally actually, I was watching Hyderabad Literary Festival, and then I picked that up and I actually went through it, and I found so many things which resonated with me. And
Mhm.
most of all, it was like with the lockdown and things, like you kind of feel that how many more years I really have? Do I really have it in me? The world seems so dismal. And here's a person who's 82 plus, still alive, still thriving, still going strong. And the world is his stage. He's all over India. I mean, and starting from Allahabad, he goes on to different parts, from the eastern part of India to western, to the glitter of Bollywood. And then he goes on to, on the international stage, he is in Boston. He is at the moment director of Rotterdam, in Rotterdam, of World Music's department. So, and other than that, you name the place and he's there, whether it's Russia, Mexico. So nothing is stopping him. But the journey, more than where he's arrived now, what is fascinating is actually from where he started. And the fact that the flute or the bansuri or any music for that matter, for his father was an hindrance, an obstacle. And it was like he thought that it was an indulgence for the rich, and he wanted him to become a wrestler. So the whole thing is about his struggle from trying to, and the reason he chose it is again because he could hide it anywhere. It was cheap to buy. And he initially went from Hindustani classical music, vocal music, till he was told that he doesn't have the range. So he went which instrument to choose, and the cheapest one, which could be hidden from the gaze of his stern father, was a bamboo with holes in it, which is called flute or bansuri in Hindi. So, that I found very endearing. And the fact that he's still going on, and the relationship which he has with his students now, the relationship which he had with his teacher, who was very mercurial, and she had a temper, and it wasn't easy to convince her to make uh, him her disciple. And the whole journey from starting from All India Radio, where he's learning from listening, to the fact that now he has students around the world, and he has changed. And as an educationist, it appeals to me because he wants innovation. Like that was a time when it was rote learning, and his teacher definitely said, "Don't question me." But he he wants his students, and there's a lot of laced humor, and he does want his students to collaborate, learn from each other's mistakes, and innovate, improvise. So
Yes.
all that is, and there's fusion with other Western, players, different
Okay.
instruments. So, I have so much, like I was feeling that before this started today, this program, that even after saying so much would be said, left unsaid, because I've really enjoyed the book.
Great, great,
It was
great, great.
inspirational as well as aspirational for me,
Okay.
particularly at this time of COVID-19 and lockdown. And I feel
Yes.
if he can do it, so can I.
Definitely, definitely. Interesting. So, Madhu, can you think of ways that this book can help with enhancing a person's imagination and empathy?
Yeah, for that I'd start with, like, if you say choose like the quote which comes to my mind is of Einstein's quote that imagination is more important than knowledge. So when I look at imagination, I mean, it is he the fact that he could dream big, and he was able to go places. He wasn't, he started from Allahabad, which is in the north, and went. That itself shows the belief in you. And it's imagination. And in the context of his playing the bansuri or the flute, it's also there that he had to imagine the stories or the mood. And if you notice, whether it was in the films or whether it was the Call of Valley, where with his friend Shiv Kumar Sharma, which is an all-time international bestseller in the instrumental category, that you find that he is able to, perceive the way the shepherd must be. You hear the music, and you can think that the sheep must be grazing, the leaves are falling, the tall trees, the scene in Kashmir or whatever. So you do have to bring alive the visual poetry on the celluloid. It's very important to be able to conceive it, to imagine it. And as an artist, he has excelled in doing that.
Yes.
So that imagery he created, and he was able to lend right from the background music to the fact that he became a full-fledged composer, and he was able to take the imagery forward. So I said that imagination is important. And of course, the second part, I think you mentioned empathy. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, there are innumerable examples of empathy in the book. One, of course, is that unless you imagine and you have the feel for the characters or thing, you can't really be producing that quality of music. You need to feel whether it's a sad mood, whether it's a holy celebration, or whether it's pomp and show or marriage ceremony or whatever. And he's lent his music to all different scenarios. But other than that, what appealed to me was the empathy that a motherless child, he lost his mother at the age of 5, and he was with a stern father, and the way that you have empathy for him, that because he's striving for something which is so legitimate. I mean, it's nothing like, but he thinks, as I mentioned, that it's for the rich, and he wants him in the wrestling bout. But yet at the same time, what amazes me is that he doesn't have any bitterness towards his guru, towards his father. Yeah, and he says that because of the years in Akhada where I wrestled and I went, I could control my, breath. And because I can control my breath and the stamina which I have to date, I owe it to my father. So,
Great.
and
Yes.
I mean, all these things, then the relationship which he had with his, teacher who refused to accept him. And she put the board at the entrance of her apartment that ring the bell 3 times. And if nobody answers, just leave your card and go away. And later on also, she was very mercurial. She was hot-tempered. But at the same time, she became a mother to him. So that was it really, which we call the Guru Shishya Parampara, or the tradition of the teacher and the pupil going along together. So there's empathy angle as well there.
Perfect.
And then also there is empathy when the strict father, when he decides to go and start working, leave home and go and work in Cuttack. And he says that, oh, you're leaving me, but I never remarried because of you all. So there are many shades of human emotions which bind you to the book, and and takes you to the level where you can empathize with the different characters.
Great. I'm going to come up with one of the questions to all of you at the probably later in the discussion. But yeah, so Madhu, coming to the next question, as just a quick one, I would like to ask in a brief. So how do you think, what about the mind? Like, could it help to broaden the mind? Like,
yeah, I do think that, for him, actually, the broadening of mind, first, of course, it is like, I again remember Napoleon Hill for saying that what you cannot conceive or believe, you cannot achieve. So in this context, like, because he can, imagine things. So I know that part of the previous question. That is why his mind takes the wider picture and he goes on. But before that, it's also a feeling of utmost surrender. For him, music is an offering. It's something divine. It's not a performance. So you are beckoning the gods, and because the flute is the instrument of in our this thing, Lord Krishna. So it's like he's playing for the Lord, and it's a divine interpretation. So that broadens, and he says, for me, playing the flute is like yoga. So that's the meditation part of it. But having said that, and the imagery and all does come into it with the empathy. But also for me, it was that he goes the way his mind conceives from a town in UP to the bigger, wider world, and how he goes forward. And in the bargain, when you do something with so much of dedication and the spirit of, humility, and you, in the bargain, you achieve material success as well. So the broadening of mind is even linked with material success, certain practical things, like he loves to buy cars and he has lots of them now. He's able to have gurukuls or places where his students can study and live like it used to be before. So the broadening of mind for him starts with this, from being in a small place and then going to across India and then playing music for different regional languages
Great.
to
Great.
going on a world stage. And then in the bargain, getting acclaim, national awards, international awards. And, he's played in Royal Albert Hall. He's played in, in Boston. He's played so much. I was really fascinated.
Yes.
Because he
That's
said
pretty
music is music.
Exactly. I can understand that. Definitely. That's
And
really
just,
inspiring, actually. Sorry,
yeah,
please.
because it's not a conditioning of it that only my way is the best, but it's just music is music. That's why he's able to, amalgamate everything, have produced fusion music. So it's quite fascinating and very inspiring as well as aspirational. And then the whole world becomes one.
True, true. I'm sure later on in the discussion, I'll be asking you some more questions. So that's I can see that passion towards the book, and there's a very question ready for that actually later on in the show. But thanks, Madhu. Some really good points for us to think about here. Now, thanks. So, if I may come to Shazia. Shazia, can you start by telling us a bit about the book you have chosen? I'm sure you are waiting and hope that that the character from the book behind you.
So that's just the book that I've chosen for everybody that I think is my Valentine is very closely associated with some of the work I do. And initially sometimes you think, am I different? And then you pick up a book and you think, there are other people that exist that are aligned with you. And this book is called Dare to Lead by a lady called Brené Brown. And she is from the US and, she is a research professor at the University of Houston. And when we look at books and when we try to look at something which is research-based and then which is maybe learning-based through nonfiction and then fiction, it's very difficult to find a book that has a mixture of all three. But this one, I have it here. It's called Dare to Lead. And I really, enjoyed reading it. It was something that I purchased in the start of my leadership career and didn't get into it as much. But then when I read it the first time, it had a different impact. And then when I reread it at a later stage, I kind of thought, oh my God, I've forgotten some of the bits that were in this book. And I really resonated, one, with the author, and two, with the content and some of the experiences. And what I really liked about Brené was the way she used, being an academic and a researcher, how she was able to use a narrative. And it's quite interesting because we've all today, without realizing, have spoken about stories and narratives within the book that we've chosen. And when somebody wanted to introduce her on a talk about her book, it was like, how do I introduce you? Because there's a significant understanding or a difference between what a researcher is and what a storyteller is and how you bring it together. And what I really liked when she said was that stories are data with a soul. So her stories are linked to her research. And she went out to find out about, what is holding, what the courage in leadership. And she ended up discovering things like shame and vulnerability, and then linking that to relationships and connections, and how do leaders actually connect, and how your culture comes into it as well. So I found it really, really fascinating because it was a very challenging concept, but the way she brought it out, just like I think Hazel mentioned and Madhu, that they have the learning, but it can also be a self-help book as well. So really, really enjoyed it, and I think I resonated with it. And I think the second time I resonated with it more because I was able to become a bit more reflective of some of the experiences I had to face. And the best thing about it, I felt, was it validated some of the things that I did do. Because then I realized that because I'd read it and left it, and maybe it was in my subconscious mind, then I experienced some of the similar scenarios that she talks about. And I had to make some difficult decisions about values, integrity, choices, difficult conversations. Should they be had? How should they be had? And Brené goes through all of the fact that, what makes us a brave leader that has impact. And sometimes it is having those powerful, difficult conversations. So I think it's a very good book for somebody who is in not when you have to be in leadership, even if you're a learning student, you're still a leader within your own situation. So it could relate to different scenarios within
Great.
that.
Great, great. Thanks, Shazia. So, Shazia, can you think of how your book can relate to cognitive mental stimulation?
Yeah, I think you know, because the first and foremost, when I reread it, it did brighten up my thinking. You know, because it was, I resonated with it. I thought, you know what, I'm not the only one that is like this. I'm not the only quirky one who likes to study and learn, and there's other, and how it can be utilized. But in terms of mental stimulation, I think it was a language, things like the style of writing, because very much so when we're into research, we think you have to write in a particular way. You think about academic writing and you think about academic reading, but she was able to take the data and the research and apply it in such a lovely narrative style that it really got me thinking of, why do we condition ourselves to think in a particular way? It's like a book that self-develops. So again, stimulates to you to become self-aware, starts to make you think, you know, what is it that I'm doing that is in alignment, but what can change? So it stimulates the choice of language, the scenarios. And I think it actually made me go deep into myself and think about emotion. And I know that when you talked about emotion and empathy as well, and really think about relationships and how do we create relationships, and make me self-aware of, okay, in my career, if I've had as a leader, what made me stand out? How did I align? And maybe that happened naturally, but now I was able to stimulate my thinking and think, what were the key cogs that enabled that to happen? So how did that connection happen? Where do the values lie? Were there times that I exposed my vulnerability that may have made the connection stronger? Because then what happens is people see you as normal. You're not just a leader, you're also a human, and you can relate to what they're doing. So I really felt that it stimulated me, and it can stimulate anyone's cognitive thinking that way. But in general, you know, it is about personality, it is about becoming self-aware and really relating to life, that life is messy. You know, she went out to research one thing and discovered lots of other things, and then started to clean it up, if you like, if that's the right term to use. And really connection is what it's all about. And the other thing, I think what stimulated me, and I'm really much about positivity, and I know Hazel, you talked a lot about positive thinking as well as Madhu with books that you spoke about. But Brené refers to lots of quotes, and I know I really like the quote Madhu shared about Napoleon. You know, if you can't conceive what your mind, you know, you conceive what your mind can, you know, in those lines. I don't know it off by heart, but that particular quote. And Brené talks about lots of quotes in the book. And if you go through every chapter starts with a quote. You know, you can't get to courage without rumbling with vulnerability, or what stands in the way becomes the way. And I felt like, you know, someone's talking my language, the way I like to talk. So it's got a lot of meat in the book.
Great. Thanks. Oh yeah, sorry. Thanks, Shazia. That was really the last quote. I like that last one actually.
What stands in the way becomes the way.
Exactly. So thanks, Shazia. And what about brightening our day? I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in this one. How could it help with brightening someone's day?
I think in terms of, you know, everybody as an audience, doesn't matter where you are. I think the book was very good in, you know, we sometimes think we are going through challenges, and those challenges only are lying within us, and everybody else perhaps doesn't face them. And it just brightens up that it happens. It's how you perceive something. It's how you relate to the issue. You know, the issue is not the issue. Your relationship with that issue becomes the issue. So it's that whole element of looking at the positive side, just like the character in Madhu's book is mentioned about how even at the age, how much he's achieved against things like Hazel mentioned. So it brightened up in the fact that, you know what, we have to have gratitude. We have to think positive. We can all do it. I think something I used to do a lot was I'm very outspoken, so I stand my ground. And sometimes that makes you feel, am I being too cynical? Am I being too critical? And it brightened me up when I read, daring leaders who live into their values are never silent about things. So it is a lot of emphasis on values and integrity and sticking to your values and being true to yourself and who you are and truly leading as that leader. And you end up brightening everybody else's day because they resonate with you. So I think when people read this, whether they are a student, whether they are in any emerging leaders, or even have had a wealth of leadership experience, they will walk away thinking, you know what, that's really made me feel good about myself, because they will find something that they can relate to.
Great, great. Thanks, Shazia. Thanks for sharing those thoughts and experiences. Now, I'd like to move the discussion on to how the books you have all chosen to discuss today has fascinated them and changed the way you look at certain things in life. So, Hazel, if I come to you first this time, so tell us any part of the book or story that fascinates you the most, and how has it changed the way you look at things today?
It's very broad. There's many aspects to this book, and it covers a lot. I mean, it will talk about how it will help you in business to eliminate your worries. It will give you tactics to do it. It tells you how to lessen financial worries. It looks like how you turn criticism from others into an asset, an advantage. It looks at habits of mind that help to prevent fatigue, how to avoid emotional upsets, the whole range of specific factors. But why it's kind of stood the test of time for me is I think it relates very much to what the others have said and what Shazia was saying there. It's about your habits of thought and becoming self-aware about how you think and your attitude. And that reassurance, because the writer is almost like a character here, you can identify with another person. I think there's so much we think we're on our own and we're the first that's ever felt a certain way about something, or the first person to ever feel snowed under or worried about something particularly. And then when a writer's really engaging, you realize that actually other people feel the same. And I think, like Madhu said, when it's a person who has shown really positive traits and shares those with you in their experience, you can say, all right, okay, so it is how you handle the situation. It's how you start to rethink about yourself. And for me, I was a worrier. I'm the type of person that I will, think not just about the immediate situation, but what could happen if that became even worse. And then if that happened, then what else would happen? And that's just a mindset. It's a mental habit, but it's a negative mental habit. And for me, the key to this and the thing that makes me keep going back to it is because the writer is so likable, and because it helps you to reframe your own thought process. And from that, it gives you enormous control about how you think about yourself, how you think about your life, and how you react to your circumstances. And that's a dynamic thing. Our lives are always changing. Events will come in and out of our lives, and things change so much. But the actual building blocks of what Carnegie gives you in this stand the test of time. I say this book has been a bestseller since 1948. It's been around a long time. And it's just the strategies are so sensible, so practical, really engaging, very inspiring in a down-to-earth, realistic way. And I have given a couple of other recommendations. I'm sure they'll be put in the comments to other books, because I was thinking about people working from home and students working from home, and I linked a couple of other things in there. But this one particularly is more general, because it covers all aspects of life, your work, your health, your environment, your relationships. And it's about conquering yourself, taking control of yourself, and realizing that you're someone unique and special. You've got special talents, you're an individual. And if you can master your own mind, your own imagination, and start to use your imagination positively rather than snowballing negative thoughts, you actually become immensely empowered, self-empowered. And it's a really self-empowering book because it gives you confidence and it gives you an appreciation that actually you're master of your own identity. And I think Madhu's author is very much like that as well. And Shazia, talking about people who have mastered themselves, their own identities, where they're going, and are in control of their lives. And that, I think we all desire that. And it gives you the practical elements of how to actually go about that and pursue that self journey of taking control and having confidence within yourself, and that you're in charge of your life, you're in charge of your destiny, and there's things that you can do in your own mind, in your own imagination, with your own thought process that can be enormously self-empowering and positive. And that's the key takeaway that makes it so engaging for me.
Yes, yes, thanks, Hazel. Quite a lot of good information on that. So now, if I come to Madhu, how about you? What are your thoughts on that?
You want to ask me the part of the book which I like, or
Yes,
character?
if part of the book or a story that fascinates you the most, and it has
Okay.
changed the way you look at things today.
Yeah, what really fascinates me the most is, I mean, this mood is set from the prelude, and it is about Hariprasad Chaurasia paying tribute to his Guru Ma. He calls Guru Ma because teacher and mother. And when he tries to pay tribute, there are a lot of stalwarts in different fields of music, world-renowned, and musicians who come one by one. And when it's his turn, he's unable to play at all. And he feels very dejected, and he says, why am I not able to do that? What is it that have I not been a good pupil? And soon he realizes, with difficulty, he plays 2-3 notes, and his lifetime companion in the musical world is the player Shiv Kumar Sharma, who's very good at his craft. So he kind of substitutes for him, and he gives him an opportunity, but with difficulty, and he's very pained by that thought, because he was the organizer, and Shiv Kumar Sharma plays the santoor, which is another instrument. He says, why, mother, are you not accepting my offering? And this is in 2018, December, just 2 days after she's passed away. And then after that, a series of events take place. I mean, the book is not written as a biography in a chronicle order. It doesn't sequence one, because he's a living legendary figure, and he's a world famous musician and maestro who's still alive and thriving. So it's written I like the way it's written, because it's easy, because classical music would become very heavy stuff. If it was just mentioned like that, there wouldn't be many people who would relate to it. But then later on, when he's in the series of events, as I mentioned before, and he becomes famous in Bombay, in the film industry, he has the money, he has the resources, everything, but yet his hunger, and why it fascinates me so much, is that he stays, I'm still a learner, and he's still a student, even now he is, but at that stage, he goes back in search of a guru or a teacher. And he, long back, her father, and she is the wife of the famous sitarist Pandit Ravi Shankar, Annapurna Devi. So he had said, if you ever want to learn, you learn from my daughter. So he goes, but she's a recluse, and she doesn't entertain students, and she only has 2-3, and she's closed the world totally. And as I mentioned that, you ring the bell, call bell 3 times, it go away. But he persists, and he keeps on going for 3 years. Every month, 2-3 times he rings her the call bell. And finally she does answer. And when she takes him as a pupil, but she says, she tells him that, why me? I play a very different instrument. He says, music is music. And this line kind of stays with me, whether it is in India, abroad, wherever. And that is probably something which, that not conditioning the mind has taken him so far. And later on, she has a mercurial temper. And she, once when he questions her and he says, why isn't there speed? And she bangs the instrument, the tanpura, on his head, and he very peacefully takes it, gets it repaired, ties it in a cloth, and offers it. There is a total feeling of submission because he needs to learn, and she has accepted him in the end. And the series of events happen, and she makes him unlearn everything. You know, as a teacher and as an educationist, to learn, to unlearn, you have to change your style, you have to change your flute, you have to start from the basics. And he does everything as he's told. And he says there's a practical side to it also. She tells him, don't leave the world of films from which is getting you money, because that's very important too. So she calls him at 1 in the night. So whole day he's he's working, and at 1 in the night, and goes on till early morning hours. But that kind of hard work, that kind of a teacher, and that kind of a pupil, and that relationship is what appeals to me the most. And in the end also, when the last, actually, this is the underlying main theme of the book, because in the end also he is paying tribute to her. It's 2019. This book was published in 2019. And he says that it's another way when you make an offering to your teachers. And he says that he plays for her. He wants her to be, and till late in the night, until early morning, as a homage or as a tribute. He's playing the flute in her honor. So I like the relationship, and also the fact that it was unlearning and relearning and going through the, and the perseverance and the hard work he went through. He forgot how to sleep. I mean, I know sleep is very important, and that is there, but then where does he get that time? So I was, I like that aspect particularly.
Great. Thanks, Madhu. And Shazia, how about you?
In the book, because it was a research-based book, and the fact that she said it's taken decades of research and experience to kind of come to these solutions, or perhaps a roadmap or pathway. She mentions 10 behaviors and cultural issues that leaders identified that got in their way, because it was a lot of data that she went through. And I found those 10 behaviors or cultural issues quite fascinating, because I'm doing my doctorate, and one area I am looking at is leadership, and especially in the ethnic community. And it was, number one, some leaders like to avoid, or many, tough conversations and giving honest feedback. And it goes back to that, the book being Dare to Lead and having courage. So that, and so it sort of brought to it brought to the surface, why does that happen? It got me thinking. And it's either due to lack of courage, it could be due to lack of skills. And sometimes it's a cultural norm in some places. Just, we've got to be nice and we've got to be polite. So those tough conversations don't take place. And, whenever managing anything, it's always the negativity that pops up in organizations first. So seeing the problematic behaviors. And then diminished trust due to a lack of connection. So not having that time to build those relationships. And maybe not taking enough smart risks. And then being stuck in certain defined setbacks for various reasons. And then too much shame and blame came up. And then this is an interesting one, because this was close to me. Avoiding any conversation about diversity and inclusivity sometimes, maybe due to lack of knowledge. Something goes wrong, quickly rushing into an ineffective solution rather than taking the time to reflect and think of a sustainable solution. Values of organizations mainly being quite gauzy. They can be assessed in terms of aspiration rather than actually behaviors. And then that finally led to, perfectionism, perhaps preventing growth. And I think the key bit was, these behaviors are hard skills. And I never really thought about hard skills. I've always thought about human skills, soft skills, but not, and if you can, you don't achieve a good culture without constant attention, without an environment of safety, courage, and vulnerability. These are hard skills, but they are teachable skills. And I think this book addresses them. And I think that is my biggest takeaway from here, that has opened up my thinking about things, at the same time made me self-aware and reflect. Made me feel pretty good, because I thought, you know, I do have these tough conversations and I do some of these things that were coming up as not many people doing. And like I said before, it kind of gave me that validation. And the other interesting thing before I close on it was the juxtapositions. There was a lot of talk about, you know, feeling brave, but at the same time, you know, being afraid. So many leaders have feel positive and negative feelings happening at the same time, and thinking, you know, that's normal, it's okay. And maybe the community needs to come together and support each other a bit more, because it can be quite lonely. So it's really, really enlightened me, I think, from the various aspects that I've gone through.
Great, great. Thanks, Shazia. Thanks for your input. So let me just come to that question we are here for, which is my book, My Valentine. So I'd like us to talk now about that special book that you all hold dear to your hearts. So let's call the book that has become your Valentine, to make it seasonal. So Madhu, if I can come to you first this time, from all the books you have read, tell us about that special book. I'm sure you already told that has become your Valentine, and why is that?
Yeah, as I mentioned to you before, Abhinav, that at the moment, I mean, there are books you've read before and you are reading. I mean, You Can Heal Your Life, you know, by Louis Hay, or you have Beautiful Mind. There's so many others. But at the moment, because I was so much into it, and because I think it resonated with me a lot, because of the situation I am in, probably for long in lockdown and this and that. And I feel how much, as I mentioned, and I feel that as an educationist also, I feel that there is, he has gone ahead. I mean, that's the book which I said, like, you know, I have it also. I said, let me also show it like Shazia did. So I'm taking this from Shazia. So I just mentioned that, you know, it was kind of, it's the simplicity, the humility, the perseverance, the hard work, the ability to, you know, go on and try to make something out of your life. And then you have, you know, the relationship which you share with your students, and the kind of unlearning bit and relearning. And there are so many aspects to it, which I find particularly endearing, more so because he, as I mentioned, he is alive and he's going. And as I mentioned in that thing and the prelude, I didn't complete it, I somehow forgot. He couldn't play because he was rushed to the hospital and he had to get 3 stents put. But despite that, despite Parkinson's hitting him, you know, and one hand has a tremor, nothing can, that spirit, nothing can put the spirit down, you know. It's indomitable. Yes. It's always will be there. And that is perhaps what appeals to me most so much, that, you know, you can conquer everything if you really have it in you. So that kind.
So that's how it became your Valentine. Great.
Yeah, it did.
Great. Lovely. And Shazia,
I think
your book, your Valentine.
It's my Valentine because I see myself within this. I saw myself within the writing style, within the author. It excited me. I thought, you know what, I used to think you can't do both. You know, you're a boring academic researcher and that's what you're perceived at. But then the TED Talks came through and I started watching her TED Talks, and it really fascinated me that there is a characteristic there. You can be a researcher and a leader and a writer and a really good speaker. And it made me think, you know, who am I? You know, I always questioned, why do I always felt that I was the black sheep and I did things differently, or the one that stood out by being the boring one. But it made me think, actually, no, you don't have to be boring if you're into research. You can be quite interesting. It's the way you do it. And it's being confident in who you are, in your own skin and your own personality, and allowing that to just flow and being open to your relationships and your connections and vulnerability and values. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. and it actually brings out your authenticity. So it really aligned with everything that I'm doing, and that's why I've fallen in love with, because now I'm thinking I can still do this and this with my research, which before I was parking separately a lot. So it's made a difference in what I've done my work on. It made me align it can be done. So that's why I love the book. And I think one message is there can be a time when you pick up a book and you can't get into it. And I'm sure many of us have had those situations. And then you do pick it up and you think, oh my God, I don't understand why I didn't like it the first time I read it. And it's that emotion or experience of that time. So I think my message would be, never just give a book one chance. Give it a second chance, because you know what, that second chance might change your life.
Might change, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Thanks, Shazia, thanks. And Hazel, how about you? Why is your book your Valentine?
I think this book is for two reasons, really. And my first love was literature and English literature, and so I have many books and a vast amount of novels and so on. But what I really love about this book, first of all, is the way it is written. It is a non-fiction book that has the same tone and engagement as a work of fiction. And you really feel you get to know the character of the writer. And it's so easy to read and so easy to get into, but so relevant. And there's just such a lovely way, a lovely style of writing that he has. It just draws you in, you identify with him. It's so pleasurable to read. It's easy to read. But also enormously useful. So I love the style of his writing and the way he puts it together, and just the way he engages the reader, which is really superb. And the second reason I really like it, and I think it ties in with what my colleagues have said, in all of these three writers, they have not been afraid to engage with their challenges. They're always learning, they're always growing, and that's a really inspiring thing when you get that in a writer, because I think so many of us, when we get a challenge or we get a problem, we get frightened and we get worried, and then we may get depressed or demoralized. But these writers have actually looked at that as an opportunity, and they haven't been weighed down with it. They've engaged with the challenge, and as a result, they've grown and developed as individuals, and have really embraced life's challenges as ways to become stronger and more self-knowing, and more able to deal with things, and more able to extend themselves to different facets of life. And that is really inspiring. And I think that we've all shared that appreciation of people who don't run away from life's challenges, but face them head on. And in looking at what they've done, we get some hints and tips about how we can also meet our challenges. And actually the challenge is a way to become a stronger individual, to know ourselves better, to be less fearful, to embrace challenges as an opportunity, and an opportunity that we can actually grow from and get a better evaluation, a fairer, truer evaluation of ourselves, and a more confident evaluation of ourselves. So those are the two things for me about this book. It's a pleasure to read. It's so nicely written. There's so much positivity in it. It's very honest. He speaks about his own experience. He tells us what works for him and what has worked for other people, and shares it in such an enjoyable way that you come away from it feeling, yeah, I can take this on now. I've got a problem, but you know what? I'm not going to run away. I'm going to fight it, and I'm going to beat it, and I'll be stronger when I come out the other end of it. And I think that's a great sentiment. And it's a book that you can put away for a long time and go back to. And I think the test of a really good book is that you keep going back to it and you find different elements of it each time you do. And I think if you can read a book and come back to it in 3-5 years and still get something out of it, it's a really good book.
Yes.
Engages with it. And I think all these books have that sort of standing the test of time because of their honesty and their courage and the integrity that they show.
Great. I can actually see while all of you were talking, that smile on your face, that that as if you're actually involved in that right now in that book and as a character. So I could feel that really inspiring, and I need to find out that book, which is my Valentine now after hearing all of you. Really, actually. But thanks a lot. Really, thanks a lot. So yes, well, we have come to the end of our discussion, and hopefully, we have given our audience a few things to think about and take away as well. So, on behalf of AP Education Online, I would like to take the opportunity to thank our panel, Dr. Hazel Hind, Shazia Hussain, and Madhu Sharma. So, we really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you for sharing your personal thoughts and views on books that are special to you, and perhaps given our audience some tips on books that they may be interested in reading from a mental health perspective, or in terms of getting that peaceful sleep and other aspects that we discussed today. So thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye. Thank you.